based in Wellington at the Wellington Community Law Centre. We do a number of things at the Law Centre. The primary role really is around free legal advice, so we run sessions twice a day where people can drop in and get legal advice on any issue that is concerning them. And then also run specialist legal advice sessions. And then 18 months ago, the Restorative Justice team joined the Community Law Centre. And it's been really interesting seeing it grow. So in terms of my role, I'm a mediator, so in New Zealand and Australia is now the same in terms of accreditation. Your IAMA is the same as ours, so I'm an accredited IAMA mediator. And I'm also a restorative justice facilitator, and I have been for 10 years, which means that in terms of our context, so we take place in the gap between the plea and the sentencing. And sometimes that pushes out quite a lot so that we can either have the meetings if people aren't ready or, a whole bunch of reasons. And also so that the judge can then see that any promises made have been met. So that's really lucky that we've got that piece of victim rights legislation. But we also last December got some changes to the Sentencing Act, which means that it is now compulsory. So if there is a guilty plea, if there are offence victims who were harmed, and if there's a restorative justice service available, then the judge must refer the case to restorative justice. So as that didn't come with a whole bunch of new, facilitators that we could do. So in real life, as is often the case, it's not quite as beautiful as the plan, but what we do have then is a huge endorsement in that Sentencing Act that judges at least know that they need to be doing this. There is a beautiful set that has 78% of offence victims, one particular study, 78% of offence victims felt better after the restorative justice meeting, and 80% would recommend it to others. So even those that didn't necessarily, that didn't get what they thought they wanted to get from it, still saw it as a process, which I love, and I probably used the wrong headings on those, but so the reasons that people like it, and the reasons why we have supportive judges, and when we do get judges together for for meetings and things, is it feels like something you can actually do that will actually make a difference. So it makes offence victims feel better. They feel heard. They feel understood. There's great research from the UK that talks about less days off in terms of coming back to work. Just in terms of feeling better, mental health. Basic everyday stuff. So we've got 80% of offence victims feeling better. We've got proven drops. At least, worldwide, it shows neutral or drops in reoffending rates. So in terms of desistance, particularly the New Zealand legislation, absolutely drops in reoffending, up to 25% drops in reoffending, and where there is reoffending, less serious reoffending. And one of my colleagues had a fabulous case, which was just a beautiful of a burglary that took place, and the offence victims expressing really clearly how impacted they'd been by this burglary, and it was a long and useful discussion. And one of my colleagues had this moment where they turned back to the offender, and the offender said, "Look, from now on, I'm just never going to burgle another house again." And it was just this huge moment. I'm only going to do commercial properties. It's getting there. But in terms of understanding the impact, and I mean the things, if somebody hasn't had a home that they've felt at home in a kind of a sacred space, it's really hard to convey that without somebody saying, my granddaughter won't come after school anymore. She is too scared to come to my house after school. Do you know what impact that's having on her parents, and on me? And you caused that, And that's huge. People don't think that. They go, oh, you had insurance, I took the thing. Some people think sometimes. But hearing real stories, it's that same thing. The truth just rings like a bell. Well, the judge has to read the report and take it into account in sentencing, because that's enshrined in law. Has been for a long time. The judge has to do whatever sentencing they believe to be right for it. So there is a continuum for every sentence, for every case. And the judge gets to look across that. And really what the difference that restorative justice can make is seeing both the wider context of what was happening at the time, which may or may not be of benefit for the offender, absolutely. The impact that it's had on the offence victim, which is a huge part. And we have a victim impact statement process where the victim, regardless of restorative justice, if a crime is committed, you'll write, I don't know if you have the same thing, yeah? Sweet, okay. So then the judge will look at this and go, okay, so this is what happened, these are the impacts, what agreements have they made? So he is going to, wait for her and she's going to come and paint the fence because she drove her car through the fence, right? So she's going to paint the fence, she's going to fix it up by this date, whatever. So that's good. Or they're going to pay this amount of money. Has it been paid by sentencing? No. Do we need to delay sentencing? How are we going to arrange payment for that? And that'll often also go through the courts, $20 a week, whatever. So they'll look at the agreements that'll be made and then choose which of those they can include in a sentence. It's one of the most researched interventions within the justice system, and it seems to have rates that are unprecedented by any other kind of intervention. So I think sobriety is kind of on a par, if you can achieve sobriety. But there are different studies showing different things. But our Ministry of Justice tends to show two things. So the first, obviously, is about the offence victims. It's better for offence victims. Regardless of anything else, is it better for offence victims? Yes. So there's a good reason to fund it. The second reason is, does it seem to impact on reoffending? Yes, it tends to lower reoffending. The third thing is it's also having an impact on sentencing. So in terms of the judges applying more flexible and different kinds of sentencing, it seems to flow through from that as well. So we, for the first 8 years of me being a facilitator, we didn't touch family violence cases. And then over time, the government started hearing people say, actually, you know what, we've got programs for the offenders and we've got programs for the respondents or the offence victims, but there's nothing actually that brings them back together. So in Wellington, what we did was say, well, let's just get a family violence specialist and a restorative justice specialist. Let's have two people in the room, two people doing the entire process from intake through first interviews and meetings with the offender and their families and the offence victim and their families, and coming together. And that's what we did. And so even though I'm not a family violence specialist, I'm certainly a person that's involved in those processes now. What I found sitting in a restorative justice session with people who have been involved in a family violence criminal case was that, when you're meeting people individually, you say, what do you want from this process? What would you like to have happen? What would be success look like? And hearing women just say, I would like him to say in front of my mum and my uncle what he did. And it is extremely powerful to be in a room and hear somebody, which they have to do. You read the summary of facts of the offence, and then they have to talk about what happened. So you do have a similar process, I'm sure, to your restorative justice. So, what happened? Tell the story, and it's the offender that speaks first because it's hardest, almost always, unless the offence victim would prefer to, in which case, do what you like, that's fine, we'll switch it around. But normally, offender speaks first, says what happened, and keeps talking without interruption until that's kind of finished, and the offence victim can then choose, based on what they've heard, what do they want to say for their story. Yeah? And then again, for their family to speak, for them to talk about the impacts of that, and him to be able to respond to the impacts, and then talk together. So even if people are separated, even if they're not going to get back together, which is often the case, they still have to often parent children, yeah, or they live in the same communities, or shit happens, It's trying to work out how can we bring together this. So we've now got a family violence accreditation system. The next step that we're looking at in terms of my job, really, is about trying to see how many more people can we get around that circle. So it really is that concept of peace building circles, who needs to be in this room for us to have agreements that are going to endure and are going to be successful for this family and for the people that aren't in this room, like their kids and the wider family. We try and make it as comfortable as possible. We've met with everybody beforehand. We've talked about who needs to be sitting next to you to have the best conversation. How do you feel most comfortable? Where would it take place? When would it take place? We have meetings and weekends in a community centre and somebody's, wherever works best for the offence victim. But But generally, they're happy because they want to hear the offender admit what they've done. And if they don't do that, or if they don't do that well enough, or if they wheedle a little bit, and obviously we do a lot of checking in the intake process. Did you actually do it? Can you admit? What can you say in that room? How do you? But in that process, 90% of the offence victims I've worked with would say that at least one of their 5 things, if they want to know, who did you sell the motorbike to? How did you get access to my house? Mostly what part of that is hearing the offender say they did it. It was me. And then often why? And then what did you do with the stuff? And, are you coming back? And all those sorts of things. What are we going to see if we bump into each other at Woolworths? All those sorts of things are often part of the conversation that we have. The most common reasons that people don't participate, I think, and I can't point to research, I can tell you something, but for an offender it's normally they just can't bear it. They can't bear saying it out loud. They just, you say, it's Jennifer here. Would you like to meet? And they go, oh my God, I couldn't bear it. I was so drunk, I was so stupid, I can't believe it. I've never done anything like this before. I just couldn't. Oh, that's fine. It's a voluntary process. We're just offering, And for the offence victim, again, sometimes they've moved on, they don't want to think about it. Oh, it was last year. I've got a reparation order in already. I've done my victim impact statement, so the judge is going to read their impacts anyway. Yeah, I work really hard, or I've got a shop, or, and that's fine. The one that breaks my heart normally is the fear, and that's the one where, I've done about probably 3 cases last month where you just sit there going, if you could only have this conversation. So normally we've met with the offender first. We get to make it up. You look at the case and you work out. For family violence, we now mostly go to the offence victims first, because if they're not interested at all, particularly if it's intimate partner violence, then we just won't go there. We never give the reason that a offence victim isn't interested as one of our reasons for it not going ahead. We just absorb that ourselves. Although there is now, if the offender says no, that is often communicated to the judge. But for the offence victims, fear is often a big thing. And for us, when we've already met almost always with the offender, and obviously we won't take it any further unless we believe that they have something to say. There's a whole bunch of checks that you go through, but having something to say, the ability to say it, being sober to say it, or are really key things, and it's quite heartbreaking when you have somebody go, oh, I just couldn't look at him, or she's just ruined me for whatever. Just see the thing, The thing that keeps you doing it is, of course, the people that do take the risk. I did this fabulous case last month with a woman who'd been struck by a drunk driver. We have a lot of traffic things as well, so drunk driver causing injury. And it was interesting. So she was quite keen. Her family wasn't very keen for her to participate, and she did anyway. You were drunk, you crashed, and you did all this stuff. You caused all this harm, and the person was able to sit there and take that and express their sorrow for what they'd done, and talk about what they'd done to change not just how they were, but how they were supporting their staff, so that their staff never... The woman felt 1,000 times better. Of course she did. They worked out that even though that the insurance had covered some of her costs, she said, I loved that car, it was a write-off, the insurance gave me this money, but it was actually a really good car. And he said, well, how much did your next car cost? She said, well, $800 more. Well, could I give you that money, And which a court could never do, because he'd paid the insurance, And it was only in hearing from her talk about her car. We've all had that. It's a really great car. It was actually worth more than it looked like it was worth. He could hear that. He could express, she was actually going to the airport to see all this stuff, this loss. And it's only humans that can deal with human loss, She ended up going and watching his sentencing because she was really interested in how it went. So it's about taking away those layers of, as humans, I think 2 things seem to be true. They're certainly true of me, and they're true of many people that I see. That the first is that we blame ourselves, oh, I shouldn't have been, if I hadn't parked my dad's car there, then they wouldn't have stolen it. This crap that's in our heads. And the other thing is that people don't care about me, So in that case, this person, they crashed into me, they didn't even say sorry, I was, all this stuff. And of course, our bail conditions, almost always they can't contact, right? But our heads go to this unhelpful place. So in terms of the healing that takes place for offence victims, a lot of that is around that. No, it's not your bloody fault, it's her fault. And she's about to tell you how it's her fault. And you don't have to say any of that as the mediator, you just set it up. And the person says, I did this, and then I did this, and I did this. And you go, why the hell did you do that? Well, I was just at a party, and my boyfriend left with somebody else, and I was in a really shitty mood. And all of a sudden you go, the truth has this beautiful, there's that Leonard Cohen, there's cracks and everything, that's how the light gets in. The truth just does that. When somebody speaks the truth, you go, oh, all right, well then of course, I suppose that, it's still a shitty thing to do, and you damaged my car really badly. But at least now I understand, you weren't sitting outside my house planning it. My house was in between the party and your house, yeah? And you were shitty. And I can see you're not normally. You've shown up and you've said, this is the worst thing I've done, I'm so embarrassed. My grandmother's here and she's really embarrassed too. It totally changes that dynamic, because all of a sudden I don't feel that it was my fault, and I don't feel that you don't give a shit about me. I can see actually you do, yeah?